Imagine standing on frozen ground in January 1475, watching Sultan Mehmed II the Conqueror, the man who shattered Constantinople's legendary walls 22 years earlier, send his most experienced Ottoman way, Governor Hatem Suleiman Pasha, with an army estimated between 60,000 and 137,000 soldiers to crush tiny Moldavia, only to see that massive force channeled into a fog-shrouded valley where hidden artillery, crossfire from 3 directions, and cavalry charges in blinding conditions produced approximately 40,000 Ottoman casualties versus 5,000 Moldavian losses, in history's most devastating example of terrain exploitation, defeating numerical superiority. January 10, 1475. Prince Stephen III, the Great of Moldavia, with approximately 40,000 troops, including 5,000 Hungarian Sekeles, 2,000 to 5,000 Wallachians, 2,000 Polish cavalry, and 1,800 Hungarian auxiliaries, faced an invasion force potentially 3 times larger that had spent 2 months marching through brutal winter conditions from Sofia to the Moldavian frontier. Here's what makes this tactically brilliant. Stephen had spent weeks before the battle implementing scorched earth warfare, poisoning every well, burning every village, destroying every food depot along the Ottoman route, ensuring that by the time Suleiman Pasha's exhausted, starving army reached the Podul in Nalt Valley near Vaslui, they were already half defeated by hunger, cold, and demoralization. Then, Stephen chose battlefield terrain that neutralized the Ottoman advantage in 30,000 cavalry by selecting a narrow valley flanked by marshland and the Berlad River, where thick winter fog on the morning of January 10th concealed 20 Moldavian cannons positioned on high ground. When Ottoman infantry pushed into the funnel, hidden artillery opened devastating fire, followed by crossfire from 3 directions that turned disciplined Janissary formations into panicked mobs. Elite Moldavian heavy cavalry then struck through the fog, shattering Ottoman cohesion completely. Many Ottomans drowned during panicked retreat across the icy river. To understand why this single battle echoed across empires for decades and forced Sultan Mehmed II to cancel his planned invasion of Hungary, you need to understand Moldavia's impossible strategic position in 1475 as a tiny principality squeezed between the Ottoman Empire's unstoppable expansion and the fragmented Christian kingdoms of Central Europe. If you picture Eastern Europe in the 1400s, Moldavia sits in that critical narrow strip between the Carpathian Mountains and the Dniester River, not a large kingdom like Hungary or Poland, but occupying strategic territory that functioned like a bridge. Whoever controlled that bridge could decide who entered Central Europe and who didn't. After Constantinople fell in May 1453, when Sultan Mehmed II the Conqueror at age 21 accomplished what generations of Ottoman rulers had failed to achieve by breaching the legendary triple walls through artillery, bombardmentien, that bridge suddenly became priceless. The Ottoman Empire was pushing north and west with terrifying speed and systematic efficiency. Every year meant more Christian towns swallowed, more borders redrawn, more vassal states created. Moldavia, small as it was, found itself stuck between this rising superpower and the larger Christian kingdoms desperately trying to keep Ottoman expansion at bay through a chaotic mix of alliances, tribute payments, and occasional military resistance. Moldavian princes played a dangerous diplomatic game, paying tribute when necessary to buy time, switching sides when opportunities appeared, doing anything to keep independence alive just a little longer. Denn in 1457 A new leader emerged who would change everything: Stephen III, known to history as Stephen the Great. He inherited a principality, squeezed by pressure from every direction: Ottoman tribute demands, Hungarian interference, Polish ambitions, internal noble rivalries, and the constant threat of Tatar raids from the east across the Dniester River. Here's where things escalated toward inevitable confrontation. By the early 1472s, Sultan Mehmed II wasn't thinking small anymore about regional dominance. His strategic vision aimed at Hungary and the very heart of Christian Europe beyond. But before a massive army could march confidently toward Budapest and Vienna, the unpredictable frontier had to be pacified through force. That meant Moldavia had to be either conquered or broken into submission. Originally, Moldavia had been paying the Ottomans yearly tribute since 1456 as the price of maintaining nominal independence. But Stephen had different ideas about his principality's future. In 1464, he made a move that on paper looked almost suicidal. He stopped paying tribute completely and marched out to retake Chilia, a heavily contested fortress port on the Danube controlling crucial river access and trade routes. In modern strategic terms, imagine a small country suddenly seizing back a major naval base from a global superpower. You can probably guess how the Ottoman court reacted to that brazen challenge. This wasn't just about one fortress. It was a message. Stephen was declaring, we're not just some buffer state paying protection money. You need to start treating us like a real player on this chessboard. And that message wasn't only aimed at the Ottoman Sultan's court in Constantinople. It was equally aimed at Hungary, Poland, and every Christian kingdom watching this tiny principality take a stand that larger, wealthier kingdoms were too cautious to attempt. Stephen leaned into that bold identity strategically. He branded Moldavia as the gateway of Christendom, the last door standing between Ottoman expansion and the Christian world beyond. Because of this brilliant framing, every battle Moldavia fought suddenly felt bigger than itself, carrying implications for all of Europe. Every Moldavian soldier wasn't just defending Suceava, their capital. They were defending all of Christianity from Islamic conquest. Stephen wasn't just brave through reckless courage. He was systematic and methodical in his military reforms. If he was going to face an empire with potentially hundreds of thousands of troops available, he needed more than patriotic passion. He needed an army that could punch far above its weight through superior training, organization, and tactics. So he rebuilt Moldavia's military machine from the ground up over nearly 2 decades. First, he strengthened central authority by pulling power away from noble families who often acted like independent rulers of their own mini-kingdoms. Then he did something politically revolutionary. He freed peasants from their feudal ties to the land through legal reforms. Once freed from serfdom, these men could become professional soldiers rather than agricultural laborers. Suddenly, Moldavia had a much larger pool of motivated, able-bodied fighters. Over the years, Stephen created a sophisticated 2-tiered military system. First, the Ostea Mica, the small army. This was the professional standing force, always ready to mobilize rapidly. It included heavy cavalry units with names like Viteji and Kurtny, who formed the elite shock troops. Then there was lighter cavalry called Kalarashi, fast enough to scout ahead or harass enemy supply columns. Finally came disciplined foot soldiers known as Lefeji. These weren't peasant militias with farming tools, but trained, paid fighters serving under specific commanders with titles borrowed from Byzantine military tradition, the Sputar leading cavalry formations. The Aga commanding infantry units. Second, the Ostea Mare the Great Army. This was the national militia, the people's army mobilized during major invasions. When Moldavia faced existential threat, every man capable of holding a bow, spear, or axe could be summoned through a general levy system. Some estimates put these mobilization numbers in the tens of thousands. But more important than raw numbers was the motivation factor. These men were defending their own soil, their own families, their own Orthodox churches from Islamic conquest. That kind of morale cannot be purchased with gold. Stephen also embraced new military technology with enthusiasm unusual for a small principality. Moldavia's artillery became surprisingly modern for the mid-15th century, comparable to many Western European states with far greater resources. At Vaslui, Stephen deployed 20 cannons, which might not sound impressive by later standards. But in 1475 too, that amount of mobile field artillery was highly significant for a principality 1/10 the size of the Ottoman Empire. By the time the Ottoman Empire prepared to crush Moldavia once and for all in late 1474, Stephen had created exactly what he needed: a flexible, fast-moving, highly motivated force that could strike an enemy 10 times its size through superior positioning and then vanish before that enemy could effectively respond. It's the dead of winter in Eastern Europe, January 1475, and the Ottoman Empire decides that this frozen hellscape is the perfect moment to launch one of its most ambitious military operations in the Balkan region. The strategic logic went like this. Step 1, crush Stephen the Great decisively and neutralize Moldavia as an independent power. Step 2, spend the winter occupying Moldavian territory, regroup force, and then strike Hungary in spring, linking up with the Sultan's main army for a massive coordinated push into Central Europe's heartland. This ambitious plan forced Hatem Suleiman Pasha, the experienced governor of Rumelia, Ottoman Europe, to march a massive army straight into Moldavia at the absolute worst possible moment of the year, climatically. That decision alone should make you pause and question the strategic thinking. Because everything from food supplies to horse management to gunpowder storage becomes a logistical nightmare when the ground is frozen solid and every river is either a sheet of ice or dangerously thin. But the political pressure from Sultan Mehmed II was intense and unrelenting. He wanted decisive results to clear the path for Hungarian invasion. This is where historians passionately debate and argue. Because when you examine the various chroniclers' numbers, you can immediately see why consensus is impossible. Some Polish chronicles claim the Ottomans marched with between 60,000 and 120,000 men. A few enthusiastic scribes even throw out numbers as astronomically high as 137,000, which, to be completely fair, sounds almost logistically impossible when you seriously think about feeding, housing, and coordinating that many people marching through frozen January wilderness. On the conservative extreme, historian Carmen Gabor estimates the invasion force was closer to 30,000 combatants. So which estimate is accurate? Here's the mathematical clue most serious historians pay attention to: Ottoman casualties. Multiple Venetian and Polish sources independently report approximately 40,000 Ottoman casualties, dead, wounded, or captured after the battle's conclusion. That staggering casualty figure alone tells us one undeniable thing: this was not a small raiding expedition or border skirmish. An army doesn't lose tens of thousands of soldiers unless it started with a truly massive force.